Ford CEO Jim Farley revealing that the company is shutting down electric vehicle production due to safety concerns and high costs instantly changes the weight of the conversation around the entire auto industry. This is not the kind of announcement that lands like a routine business update or a temporary production adjustment. It carries the force of a warning signal from one of the most recognizable names in manufacturing, and it hits at the exact pressure points that have defined the modern electric vehicle race from the beginning. Safety and cost are not side issues. They are the two questions that sit underneath every glossy launch event, every government incentive, every bold corporate promise, and every claim that the future of transportation has already been decided. When the leader of a company like Ford ties a shutdown directly to those two problems, the moment stops feeling like a brand-specific setback and starts feeling like a stress test for the entire electric transition. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. What makes the event especially striking is the clash between ambition and reality. Ford has spent years positioning itself as a serious contender in the electric era, trying to prove that it could take a legacy industrial machine built around gasoline vehicles and rapidly transform it into something capable of competing in a market driven by software, battery chemistry, charging access, and changing consumer expectations. That transformation was always going to be expensive, but the broader narrative surrounding electric vehicles often treated those costs as temporary pain on the way to an inevitable destination. A shutdown tied to high costs disrupts that storyline in a brutal way. It suggests that the burden did not merely remain heavy, but became heavy enough to force an outright halt, and that changes the emotional meaning of every previous promise. It makes the project look less like a difficult march forward and more like a structure buckling under its own financial weight. The safety part of the announcement gives the moment an even sharper edge. Cost can be framed as a business problem. Safety cannot be contained so neatly. Once safety becomes the reason a company stops producing vehicles, the issue moves beyond balance sheets and enters the territory of trust, responsibility, and fear. Consumers can tolerate delays, higher prices, and complicated rollouts when they believe the core product is solid. The second safety becomes central. The relationship between brand and buyer changes. Ford is not a fringe startup trying to build attention through disruption. It is one of the most established car makers in the world, with a long identity built on durability, practicality, and a broad sense of familiarity. If a company with that history is sounding the alarm over safety in its electric operations, the message becomes much bigger than one production line. It raises uncomfortable questions about how ready the technology, the manufacturing process, and the supply chain really are under mass market pressure. The title of the event carries a tone of sudden revelation, and that matters too. If Jim Farley has just revealed this, the drama lies not only in the content, but in the sense that a curtain has been pulled back. The electric vehicle market has often been discussed with a mix of optimism and strategic vagueness, especially by major firms trying to reassure investors while also preserving flexibility. When a shutdown is linked directly to safety concerns and high costs, the language becomes much harder to polish. It suggests the problem has moved beyond internal caution and into public admission. That kind of admission forces a recalibration. It changes how people interpret previous production targets, previous enthusiasm, previous media narratives, and previous confidence from analysts who assumed scale would eventually solve everything. Suddenly, scale itself starts to look like the thing that may have intensified the strain. At the center of this event is the idea that electric vehicles are not just regular cars with different engines. They require a different industrial logic. Batteries are expensive, heavy, chemically sensitive, and strategically entangled with global supply chains. Software plays a more central role. Thermal management becomes more critical. Charging expectations affect design decisions. Repair procedures are different. Training for technicians is different. Insurance concerns are different. Fire risk, whether statistically common or not, takes on outsized psychological power because it directly affects public perception. When a company halts production because of safety concerns, that decision acts as a reminder that electrification is not simply a branding exercise or a product refresh. It is a deep technical transition that places old manufacturers under extraordinary pressure to master new, disciplines at industrial speed, the cost element also exposes a tension that has haunted the electric vehicle space from the beginning. There has always been a mismatch between the political and cultural urgency surrounding EV adoption and the brutal arithmetic of producing them profitably at scale. Electric vehicles are often presented as the future, but the route to that future depends on raw materials, factory investment, charging ecosystems, software integration, battery sourcing, and consumer willingness to pay a premium for technology that may still feel uncertain to many buyers. A shutdown due to high costs suggests that this mismatch has not narrowed enough. In fact, it suggests that the more aggressively a company tries to build momentum, the more it may expose itself to losses, inefficiencies, and structural weaknesses that are not easy to absorb. That turns the event into something larger than a corporate stumble. It becomes a challenge to the assumption that mass electrification can be forced into place on ambitious timelines without major financial dislocation. For Ford specifically, the symbolic damage is enormous because the company's electric push has not existed on the edges of its brand. It has been tied to some of its most visible and emotionally charged nameplates. Ford was not trying to create excitement through obscure experimental models. It was trying to electrify icons, to send the message that the future could be built from the same cultural DNA that made the company powerful in the first place. That strategy carried enormous promise because it connected electric technology to trust, familiarity, and brand loyalty. But when production is shut down due to safety concerns and cost pressures, the symbolism flips. Instead of proving that the old industrial giants can successfully reinvent themselves, the moment suggests that even the strongest brands can struggle when they try to transplant their identity into a new technological age under intense commercial pressure. This event also shakes the perceived hierarchy between established automakers and newer EV-focused competitors. Traditional manufacturers have often argued that they possess advantages in scale, experience, dealer networks, regulatory knowledge, and quality control. Newer companies, by contrast, have been seen as fast-moving but riskier, more volatile, and more experimental. A shutdown at Ford because of safety concerns undercuts one of the biggest claims legacy firms bring to the table, namely that decades of manufacturing discipline make them naturally better equipped to deliver reliable, safe vehicles at high volume. If a seasoned company still hits a wall severe enough to stop production, then the market is forced to confront the possibility that the difficulty is not just a matter of inexperience. It may be structural to the entire transition. The emotional effect on consumers would be immediate, even among people who were never planning to buy a Ford. Public confidence in electric vehicles depends less on technical reports than on broad mood. Most buyers do not study battery chemistry, manufacturing tolerances, or incident databases. They absorb a general feeling about whether a technology seems mature, dependable, and worth the investment. News that a major manufacturer is shutting down EV production because of safety concerns instantly hardens hesitation among mainstream buyers. People who were already uncertain about charging access, resale value, repair costs, and long-term reliability now have a vivid story that confirms their worries. It does not matter that one company's issues may not represent every product on the market. In the public imagination, major warnings spread across the whole category. That is where the cost issue becomes so damaging in combination with safety. Either one alone would be serious. Together, they form a brutal one-two punch. High costs suggest the company cannot make the product work. As a business, safety concerns suggest the company cannot fully stand behind the product as an engineering outcome. When those pressures converge in the same announcement, they create the impression that electric vehicles are underperforming on both sides of the equation that matters most. They are not merely too expensive for producers, they are also bringing risks that are too dangerous to wave away. That combination threatens the core sales pitch of the modern EV movement, which has depended on convincing the public that while electric vehicles may require adjustment, they ultimately represent a smarter, cleaner, and more advanced direction for transportation. For investors and market watchers, the announcement would serve as a hard reality check on how long the electric transition may take and how uneven it may be. capital markets often reward bold strategy, especially when executives present big electrification plans as signs of relevance, innovation, and future growth. But the market also punishes weakness in execution, especially when it touches safety. A production shutdown tied to both cost and safety tells investors that the road to scale is not just delayed, but unstable. It introduces doubt about margins, about future capital spending, about warranty exposure, about supplier contracts, and about whether previous projections were built on assumptions that no longer hold. The event becomes a reminder that exciting categories do not automatically produce healthy businesses, and that being early in a high-profile transformation can also mean being first to absorb the ugliest blows. There's also a deeper industrial implication here. Electric vehicle production is often discussed in terms of consumer products, but at its core, it is a manufacturing challenge of enormous complexity. Every battery pack, every thermal system, every software-controlled function, and every supply chain input has to line up under extraordinary scrutiny. Safety problems in this context are not just about one visible failure. They can point to design tensions, testing gaps, supplier inconsistencies, rushed timelines, or the difficulty of maintaining precision while scaling volume. If Ford has had to stop production, it implies that the challenge of producing safe electric vehicles at the required cost threshold may be more fragile than public messaging has suggested. That possibility matters because it casts doubt on the idea that all major automakers can simply spend their way through the transition and emerge with stable, mass-market EV businesses on schedule. The event also places a spotlight on battery economics, which have long been treated as the hinge on which the entire EV future swings. Batteries determine range, price, weight distribution, charging performance, and a huge portion of manufacturing cost. They also sit at the center of safety discussions, because any issue involving heat, defects, damage, or system management immediately attracts intense scrutiny. If high costs and safety concerns are severe enough to shut down production, then battery technology is likely sitting in the middle of the storm in one form or another. That realization would revive skepticism about whether the industry's battery ambitions have run ahead of what is currently practical for consistent, affordable, large-scale deployment. It would also underline just how dependent the electric future remains on solving problems that are not glamorous, but deeply fundamental. For workers and factory communities, the announcement would not feel like an abstract debate about strategy. It would feel like the ground shifting underneath a major industrial promise. Electric vehicle investment has often been linked to jobs, retraining, local economic revival, and a sense that traditional manufacturing regions can carry their legacy into the next chapter of mobility. A shutdown calls that narrative into question, not in a theoretical way, but in a painfully immediate one. It reminds people that advanced manufacturing transitions do not simply create new jobs in a straight line. They can produce volatility, uncertainty, and a sense that workers are being asked to adapt to systems that remain unsettled at the corporate and technological level. The event would therefore resonate not just as a business decision, but as a social and regional shock inside the communities that have been told electrification is their future. The timing of such an announcement would matter too, because the electric vehicle market has been framed for years as a race. Automakers are under pressure not only to build good products, but to signal momentum, confidence, and relevance. Nobody wants to look slow, hesitant, or overly cautious while competitors flood headlines with new launches and production targets. In that environment, admitting that safety and cost have forced a shutdown cuts against the psychological rules of the race itself. It is an act of retreat in a space that rewards forward motion and that makes it unusually revealing. It suggests that the internal strain became too severe to conceal behind public optimism. It also implies that, at least in this case, the pressure to move quickly may have collided with the reality that some parts of the electric transition cannot be bullied into maturity through messaging and deadlines alone. From a brand perspective, the damage is especially sharp because Ford's identity has always involved a certain relationship with ordinary drivers. It is not a luxury niche brand. It is not built around futuristic exclusivity. It occupies a broad, practical place in the public imagination. That means any safety-driven shutdown hits a nerve that is different from what it would mean for a smaller or more experimental manufacturer. Ford's place in the market carries an implicit promise of accessibility and trust. When that kind of company tells the world it is shutting down EV production due to safety, concerns, and high costs, the message lands as a warning from inside the mainstream. It does not feel like a fringe failure. It feels like the center of the industry admitting that something serious has gone wrong. The implications for pricing across the wider market would be impossible to ignore. If Ford, with its resources and manufacturing experience, is struggling under high costs, then the dream of affordable electric vehicles becomes even harder to sustain. The industry has often counted on the idea that economies of scale, learning curves, and battery improvements would gradually bring prices down enough to attract mass-market buyers without destroying profitability. A shutdown tied to costs suggests that this path may be rougher and slower than promised. It raises the possibility that many electric vehicles are still trapped in an awkward zone where they are too expensive to build profitably at prices mainstream buyers consider reasonable. That is a dangerous zone because it squeezes both the producer and the consumer at the same time. Safety concerns also alter the debate around regulation and oversight. Once production is halted because of safety, it becomes harder for companies and advocates to lean on aspirational language alone. The conversation gets pulled toward inspection, testing, certification, recall sensitivity, and engineering accountability. Even without discussing what comes next, the implications are clear. Regulators, insurers, dealers, service networks, and consumers all start looking at electric vehicles through a sharper lens. Questions that once sounded like resistance to change begin to sound prudent. How are these vehicles being tested under real-world stress? How resilient are the battery systems in edge cases? How transparent are manufacturers about defects and risk? How ready are emergency responders and repair technicians? A shutdown does not answer all those questions, but it gives them new urgency. There is also a significant cultural implication in the way this event would be absorbed by the public conversation around the energy transition. Electric vehicles have become more than products. They are wrapped up in politics, climate ambition, industrial policy, national strategy, and personal identity. Because of that, every major success or failure tends to be interpreted through competing narratives. An announcement like this would pour fuel on arguments that the electric transition has been oversold, rushed, or built on unrealistic assumptions. It would energize critics who believe policymakers and corporations pushed too hard for electrification before the technology and economics were ready to support it at scale. That matters because once a product category becomes symbolic, technical problems no longer stay technical. They become ammunition in a much wider struggle over what kind of future is realistic and who gets to define it. The event would also expose how thin the line can be between innovation and overextension. In the modern auto industry, standing still is not really an option. Companies must invest in electrification because the market, regulators, and competitors all exert pressure in that direction. But moving aggressively carries its own dangers. Plants must be retooled, supply deals must be struck, labor must be reorganized, and new engineering systems must be mastered, all while the company continues to operate its traditional business and satisfy current customers. If the electric side then runs into safety concerns and punishing costs, the whole strategy begins to look like a balancing act performed on a narrowing ledge. Ford's shutdown would therefore signal not just a failure in one segment, but the immense strain placed on legacy manufacturers trying to transform themselves without dropping the businesses that still pay the bills. For dealerships, the implications would be equally uncomfortable. Dealers sit on the front line between company strategy and consumer anxiety. They have to answer questions, manage expectations, maintain trust, and turn corporate ambition into actual sales conversations. A shutdown due to safety concerns changes that environment overnight. Even customers asking about conventional vehicles may bring up the news, not because they are experts, but because they want reassurance that the brand remains reliable. Dealers would be forced into a delicate position, trying to protect confidence while confronting an event that naturally invites doubt. It would remind everyone that EV transitions do not happen in corporate slides alone. They play out in showrooms, in service bays, and in the day-to-day friction of public trust. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Ford ending EV production now? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.